Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the filming spot that I'm very unsure about, and welcome to a lesson on suspense. No matter what story you are writing, no matter what genre, what theme, what characters, what setting, no matter what your story is about, it needs suspense. If you have ever had the experience of watching a show and sitting there literally on the edge of your seat with your heart pounding out of your chest because you don't know what's about to happen, then you have watched a show with suspense. The same thing goes for if you've been reading a book and had that same feeling. Suspense is that thrilling feeling of fear that finds you when you don't know what's coming around the corner, or whenever you suspect that whatever is around the corner is dangerous. And don't be fooled, suspense is not reserved for like James Bond movies or horror novels. It belongs in every single story. And it's so good! So how can you write masterful suspense? Let's talk about it. Okay, so the first thing I want to say about writing suspense is that there's a very easy mistake to make, very common mistake to make, and that is confusing suspense for surprise. Don't do this. I know they can look the same, but they're not. They're very much not. In a very famous quote, Alfred Hitchcock outlines a scene in which two characters are talking and suddenly there's an explosion. Everyone watching or reading is surprised and probably shocked and maybe even a little bit confused. But Hitchcock says, "Where are you going? Why are you running?" But Hitchcock says, prior to this surprise, it had been an absolutely ordinary scene of no special consequence. To make this scene suspenseful instead of surprising, we would have to make a couple of changes. In the suspenseful version of the scene, we as the audience watch the anarchist put the bomb under the table. Later, when we see the two characters talking, we know that bomb is there. And so we are sitting there for the whole 15-minute conversation wondering when this bomb is going to detonate. In this scene, we are active participants. We're like shouting at the screen or the page, like desperately trying to warn these characters that there is a bomb under the table. Hitchcock concludes, in the first case, we have given the public, or the reader or the audience, 15 seconds of surprise. In the second, we have provided them with 15 minutes of suspense. Okay, cool, but why do you need suspense? Can't a story be good without it? Before we go into all the reasons why you absolutely do need suspense, don't forget you can support me by buying my poetry book on Amazon, buying me a coffee, or joining my email list. All of those links are listed in the description below. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for being here. So you'll often hear that you need suspense in your story because it keeps the reader invested, but as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't really explain anything. What about it keeps the reader invested, and why? And are we talking they keep reading because they're avoiding filing their taxes or loading the dishwasher? Both of which I'm avoiding right now. Or are we talking they keep reading because they are on the edge of their seat and they're dying to know what happens next? Obviously, we want the second one. We want our readers to be hanging by a thread, ready to like yell at their family if they even think of interrupting them. I don't condone yelling at your family, don't do that, but you get the gist. Our goal is to keep our readers hooked from the second they read that first sentence all the way until they finish the last page. We want to write one of those read it in one sitting because it's just that good books. The good news is there is a real observable difference between stories people go to when they're bored and stories people cannot wait to jump back into. Remember when I said earlier that Hitchcock's scene became suspenseful because the audience became active participants? That is why suspense is so important, audience involvement. Good stories, no matter what genre, engage their readers on a deeper level. In these stories, readers aren't just readers, they become investigators. They become detectives. They're picking up clues and data, filing them away for later, and revisiting them every time a new problem pops up. And when the reader becomes an investigator, when they start searching for answers to the questions you've set up, congratulations, they are officially an active participant in your story. Which means now, it's personal. Now, instead of just reading the book, they are investing their own time, energy, and intellect into the plot and characters. And that is where the magic happens, because as you keep building up the suspense, the reader gets more and more involved until finally they solve the last biggest problem alongside your main character. It's a joint effort. They do it together. And this kind of reader, character, author teamwork makes the climax and resolution of a story so much better. So much better. Not only does your audience have more fun reading your book when you give them a puzzle to solve, but the emotional payout at the end is crazy satisfying. So finally, we've reached the question, how do you create suspense? I think Masterclass said it best. Suspense writing is a matter of setting reader expectations by controlling information, how much you reveal, when you reveal it, and how you reveal it. But there are still lots of different routes you can take to finesse these little revelations. So here are my top 7 tips for writing effective suspense. 1. Give the reader hints. Probably one of the biggest things you can do to create suspense in your story is to give away hints. And what this really comes down to is foreshadowing, the art of subtly warning your readers what's going to happen later on. I actually almost called this video Problems in Hiding because your goal is to hide future conflicts in plain sight. For example, if your characters think the villain is on their side, you want to place subtle clues that they're really not, like their body language changing when they tell a lie, or the word choice that you use. Things that will not tell your readers that this is actually a villain, but tip them off so that later they will realize and they can go back and find that and be like, oh my gosh, I should have known. But you have to be subtle about it, and here's why. If your clues are hidden enough, then when the reader reads them, they are only going to notice them subconsciously. Their subconscious brain will see the information and store it for later, but their conscious brain isn't really going to catch on, and I wish I could tell you how I did this in my own book without fully spoiling the entire thing. But let's take the villain example. Basically, when you do this right, the reader doesn't actually know what's going to happen. They aren't actually cognitively aware that this is a villain. What they do know is that something feels off. Something about this character is different, or strange, or maybe even unsettling. And then at the end, when you reveal this character is a villain, the reader's brain is going to weave all the little clues that you placed that they picked up subconsciously, and they'll have this big aha moment where it's like, oh my gosh, why didn't I see that? It's been there all along, and it's amazing. Here are some ways to do this. 1. Let the reader see more than one point of view. If we get to watch the villain plot against the hero over here, and we also get to see them pretend to be the hero's friend over here, the suspense immediately goes up because we know that person's bad, but the character doesn't. 2. Weave... I'm such a fan of this one! Weave a web of interconnected lies and hints and reveal it at the end. You guys know that meme, the crazy guy with the corkboard? You know what? Here it is. This is what you want your book to be like. Every time you give your reader a hint, you are placing a string on that corkboard. The reader can't really see how the strings are connected, so they're gonna try and like put it together themselves, and they're gonna end up looking like that guy. But at the end, you're going to come in and weave them all together and show them how it actually works. And it's gonna be so good. Tip number 2, do the opposite. Keep your readers in the dark. You have to be so careful with this one because your reader might get frustrated if they feel like they don't have the information they need, or if they feel like you are hiding something from them intentionally. That's gonna be like a really upsetting experience. So you have to give them just enough for them to feel like they get it without actually letting them get it. A good example of this is season 1 of The Good Place, which I will not spoil right now, but if you haven't seen The Good Place, go watch The Good Place! That is a great example of how to do this. You could also go with the classic, my character is going on a mission and I'm slowly revealing why through flashbacks of backstory, like Safe Haven. Love that movie. Or you could do The Great Gatsby. My character is an enigma and everyone else is going to talk about them and tell stories and see if they can figure out who this person really is. Another way to do this is to have your characters keep secrets from each other. If you have one point of view character and the other characters are hiding information from that point of view character, then obviously your reader is not going to know that information because they only see what that one character sees. Tip number 3, shorten the timeline whenever you can. I'm almost 100% positive that when you think of suspense, at least a small part of you is thinking of characters racing against the clock, rushing to accomplish their final mission before time runs out. It's almost overdone. Actually, it's not almost overdone. It is overdone. But that's because it really is a great way to up the suspense of a story. You just have to find the right way to do it. And you can watch my video on tropes versus cliches. I swear to God, I really hope this is the right side, to see how you can avoid turning that into a cliche and keep it fresh and exciting while still doing what has been done before. And I'll give you a couple ideas right now of how to do this. Here are a few fun ways to shorten your timeline without making it look cheap. 1. Your characters are racing against other characters. For example, the villain. Both people or groups are trying to get to the same place before the other one can. 2. Force your character to decide between two things they really, really want in a short period of time. For example, say you have a character who really cares about accomplishment and achievement, but they are also falling in love. And it's like the climax of the story, and their love interest shows up right when they're about to go on stage and give like this really high profile speech, and this love interest is like, we need to talk now or we're done, right? Whichever one they don't choose, they lose. If they don't talk to their love interest, their relationship is in danger. If they don't go on stage, they don't get the achievement and recognition that they have been craving throughout the whole story. And they have 30 seconds to decide. That is suspenseful. And this goes right into tip 4, which is to ramp up the tension and make things dangerous. You have to have high stakes in your story. You have to. There has to be a sense of danger in every single novel, even flowery romances or literary fictions. And when I say make things dangerous, I don't necessarily mean life-threatening, because A, that might not be an option in your plot, and B, physical external threats get tiring after a while. So what I actually mean is threaten what the character wants or loves. And you could even take things a step further. If you can do this, applause for you, because this is the best part, is when you make things look unfixable. Like, the character has acted on their misbelief time and time again, and they have gotten themselves stuck in this rut, and we are like, there's no way to come back from that. Oops, story's over. That's one of the best, most suspenseful moments, is when the character is in dire straits and the reader has absolutely no idea how they are going to fix it. Another way to do this is, maybe a little bit obvious, but you just establish certain people or settings as dangerous. Then the reader will get nervous every time a character is around that setting or person. For example, in the amazing Netflix show Arcane, we know that the Undercity is a dangerous, crime-ridden place, and it's full of people who pose threats. So naturally, whenever characters are in the Undercity, we as an audience are really freaking anxious because we don't know what's gonna happen next. But tip number 5, don't forget to lighten up. Make everyone feel happy, make everyone feel safe. I talk about this in my video about plotting sequels. You have to have contrast in your book. It's beyond important. If the whole story is suspenseful and intense, none of it will feel suspenseful and intense because there's nothing else to gauge it with. But if you add light, happy moments, those will contrast against and ultimately highlight the intensity and suspense of the moments that aren't so good. Plus, this is where you can use red herrings and things like that to create a sense of false security for your reader, which is so fun. Tip number 6, develop your cast of characters and then fill it with interpersonal conflict. If your characters don't feel real enough, your reader is not going to care about anything that happens to them, and that includes the villain. If you develop them enough, then anything they do will make the reader care. And any hint of danger will scare the reader even more. They might even start to feel protective over the characters, which is when you've hit the jackpot. Then, once your characters are developed enough, there are a couple more things you can do. First off, fill every relationship with some kind of conflict. It doesn't have to be big, but it will add tension to every scene. And this includes the characters' conflict with themselves, but that one should be big. Bonus points if the current conflict comes from a positive backstory, like a friends to enemies type thing. You can also surprise the reader with uncharacteristic behavior. For the sake of spoilers, I won't name names. But one of my favorite examples of this is in one of my favorite shows when the villain takes in a child. By now, the show has established that this is a dangerous guy, so you expect him to hurt this kid, but he doesn't. And finally, throw in some unpredictable characters, some chaotic neutrals. The Good Place does this really well with the judge. I'm convinced she's chaotic neutral because she always makes a ruling that's good or promising and then comes in with this huge, disastrous twist, and she doesn't really care about the consequences. You don't want to do this too much because it'll get frustrating for your audience, but if you have 1 or 2 characters like this, it can definitely surprise your reader and increase the tension in your story. Number 7, last one, use description and tone to your advantage. There are a couple of really cool ways that you can use your setting and your description to create the right tone and mood. If the mood doesn't match what's happening and you do it really well, it can create all kinds of harrowing suspense. Like if your character walks into a city where something is obviously wrong, but the people are all cheerful and upbeat. Just thinking about this one gives me kind of goosebumps. It makes me feel creeped out. But on the other hand, if the mood is intense and nothing is happening, the reader will be on the edge of their seat. If anyone has ideas for something I can say other than on the edge of their seat, comment, because I'm saying it too much, but it's true. For example, the characters are at a normal, happy party, but the scene is written in such a way that we know something is wrong. Okay, so to recap, every single story needs suspense. Why? Because it engages readers and makes them an active participant in the story, which makes them more emotionally invested. And once they're emotionally invested, you've got them hooked. They're there for the long haul. You can create suspense in all kinds of ways, but my top 7 tips are: give the reader hints, or do the opposite and keep them in the dark, shorten the timeline, make things dangerous, lighten up for contrast, develop your characters and their interpersonal conflicts, and use description and tone to your advantage. So there they are, my top 7 tips for writing suspense like a pro. And if you want to see pretty much every single one of these set in motion, go watch Ozark. Ozark is so good, you guys. It's also like affecting me mentally, but it's so good. It's amazing. And the way that they create suspense is incredible. So yeah, go watch that if you're curious about seeing any of these principles actually working in a story. And I might do a case study about it soon. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Happy trails!